Welcome back to Bullet Catcher Gaming. This is Ghost Recon Breakpoint, and in today's video we are going to be discussing the game Ghost Recon Breakpoint and a bit of Ghost Recon Wildlands as well, with two very special guests, Chris and Jeff. You may have seen Chris on some of our previous videos, Captain Caveman 44 from the channel Bayonet X-Ray. I'm going to tell you a bit more about why Bayonet X-Ray was set up later at the end of the video. But Chris and Jeff, Chris served in the military for over 20 years. He's going to tell you a bit about his regiment, and Jeff is currently, well, I'm going to let them tell you all about it. So Chris and Jeff, if you'd like to introduce yourselves, away you go.
Thanks, Andy. Well, you guys know me. My name's Chris Bame. I was a captain in the U.S. Army. I rode on tanks, and I actually worked behind a desk for a lot of that time too, as operations. And also, when I deployed, this is where I met my favorite NCO, Jeff.
Hey, yeah, my name's Jeff. Like Chris mentioned, we served together in 3rd ID at Fort Stewart, Georgia. Prior to that, like I was military intelligence, then I went into infantry, which is what my branch was when I met Chris, and then now I am within the Signal Corps, which even makes I work on computers now, so I went from being a nerd to being combat arms to being a nerd again. And
So the point of both of you being on today is so we can talk about, obviously, these games and to kind of get your perspective and your military background, and tell us a bit about what you think about what these games got right and what they got wrong, perhaps, or what they could do to improve, things like that. So we're going to go through a few questions, so you can give your opinions on them. But first of all, from myself, and I'm sure from anybody watching, thank you for your service. We appreciate it. And so I'll just start off with the first question, and it's obviously to both of you, and just come in whenever you want. From a military standpoint, how accurate would you say, for example, this game Breakpoint is?
Jeff, you can answer that one.
okay, yeah, I would say quite accurate, especially from the weapons perspective. It's kind of funny firing the M4 in the game is much like firing an M4 in real life. I also, the same with the grenade launchers, the M203 is very unique and takes a little bit of a special skill to arc those things just right. But otherwise, like a lot of the other technology is great too. And I will also say for the enemy AI standpoint is quite accurate, the way they employ some flanking maneuvers on you and kind of bound under cover and stuff like that. It's quite accurate in that sense.
Okay, that's interesting, because one of the things that the criticism that this game got early on is that the AI wasn't very good. So it's really interesting hearing you say that you actually think, in terms of that it's actually quite good. I think what most people were talking about in its criticism is the fact that sometimes you can walk around a corner and there'll be like 3 wolves and they seem to be kind of set there and they barely see you, even though you're 5 or 6 kind of yards away. And I think it's more to do with that. So it's their reaction rather than you're saying it's pretty good in a standpoint that during the action, the way they react to your action and their reaction. Is that what you meant?
Yeah, exactly.
All right, okay, that's cool.
And like a typical soldier, sometimes they're not really paying attention, so
Yeah.
the obvious shit goes right by us.
No, that's cool. That makes complete sense. What about you, Chris? Do you think?
Hold on, Andy. I'm gonna look right in the camera and answer you. I started a YouTube channel because of this game. This game, they got it right. If you think about it, you crashed on an island, so you're by yourself. And Wildlands was more like active duty, to where you had your boys with you. You could call on your artillery or diversion or whatever. So this game, I think, to crash on an island like this and still kind of have that military, flair is kudos to the designers.
Fantastic. Ubisoft would be very happy to hear that. So,
What a kiss ass!
Yeah, right?
You
Give me
can tell who the
stuff.
officer was.
Right?
well,
Torch party.
in terms of how accurate it is, so you've said it's accurate. So, what do you actually think that was the things that, like, even though this is a similar question, what do you think they really got right? Like, what is it you look at in the game and kind of go, yeah, look, the way that this moves or the way that what are the kind of things that you felt that they really kind of nailed? Is it like, whether it be vehicular combat or what was it you think they got right?
Well, Bayonet X-Ray is a tactical outpost command center, and if you look at this talk up here, this is how you would set one up. If you go into any little shack in this game, there's a radio, there's a computer screen, there's a set of binoculars, there's some books, they they got down to the nitty gritty, the Pelican cases, the connexes. Like, hey Jeff, do you want to go count some sensitive items and write down some serial numbers? Like, we could go on, man.
Yeah.
For realism, I think they got it. There's some other things I could get into about realism, but as far as the flare, like, there's a map up here I'm looking at with military, grid squares on it, so they got it. They got it right.
And Chris and I talked about before too the language and the kind of discussions that you hear just the regular soldiers having as they're standing guard or on their patrol and stuff. And I think I'm pretty sure I heard this the other day when I was playing, but like an explosion had happened somewhere, and one of the guys was like, "Oh man, we got to go react to that," or something to the effect of being like perturbed, like, "Fuck, we got to go."
One of my personal favourites is if you get attacked by 3 or 4 guys, and one of them will kind of come out, and the other one will see him go down. And then the others will shout, "Oh no, they just killed Chris," or "They just killed Jeff," or whatever. Do you know what I mean? I really like that. That's cool. I don't know. It's all the games and all the years that you play shooting games and you're wiping people out left, right, and centre. And I've never heard somebody turn around and go, "Oh, poor old Graham," or "Poor old Ted." Do you know what I mean? You've never heard it. And when I first heard it, I was like, "That's brilliant."
Yeah,
that's so good. Well, anyway, so thanks for that. So that's some good things that that they've got right. So what do you think they got wrong then? Is there stuff you go, that would never happen?
Yeah, I mean, it's the typical military veteran criticism of, oh, you wouldn't somersault in combat, or you certainly wouldn't be out here alone doing something, or like taking on an entire fort all by yourself. But that's just little stuff. I mean, obviously it's a game and more fun that way. Yeah,
of course. Yeah. But what about in terms of the things that they've put in from a military aspect? Are any of the guns, for example, you kind of think that that's not what they don't do that, or the way that some of the gear works or something, you go, no, that's just ridiculous. I mean, like, for example, night vision in games never tends to really, I don't think, look quite like real night vision. I mean, I don't know what you think about things like that.
Yeah, well, definitely in Wildlands, like, we noticed the difference between there's like the regular night vision and then you can get the special NVGs or whatever they are, and like those were like the difference between like the high-tech ones and like the basic shit that like normal grunts get. I've worked with a couple guys in like special forces or whatever, just like been on mission with them, not like I'm not one of them by any means, but and it like you'd see they got like the coolest and greatest gear, and you're like, "Hey man, can I take a look through your stuff?" And they show it to you, and you're like, "Holy shit! Why are we running around with, these basic nods that have no depth perception or whatever?" So, in terms of the night vision, I think that's pretty accurate. I don't know. It's hard to say what. I haven't really noticed anything that hasn't been too accurate.
What did you think? Even though this is not to do with accuracy as such, What did you think in terms of, especially after playing Wildlands, what did you think of the whole drone aspects? And obviously drones are a big part of the military, but not in the sense that they're being used in this game as such. So, well, what did you think of that? Did you kind of feel that it took you out of a realistic military experience, or did it not really matter?
Yeah, I guess because in the sense of the drones, I mean, last time I really dealt with any like that could be used by like a small group of people rather than the, you know, big multi-billion dollar ones that get flown by actual pilots. Uh, they seem to always work like versus you don't have like this like crappy little balsa wood plane with a camera on it that you have to run and throw and
Yeah.
then and then go fucking hunt down the pieces like an hour later
Yeah.
in the woods. But
I'll tell you, when I started playing this game, I didn't even, for realism, for the channel, I didn't even want to use a drone because that shit would break all the time out here.
Really, that's fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So you literally were like, nope, not using the drone because I've had experience with that and it was crap.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Just for realism, for episodes, yeah.
So, because obviously a lot of people like to play these games in a realistic setting, turning off the HUDs and stuff like that. Do you feel that that does make it feel more realistic, or does it having a map up or not having a map? Do you think that makes? Do you think that doesn't really matter? Or how do you feel?
I think with the HUDs, obviously, yeah, in real life, you don't have a map that shows enemy positions on it or even suspected enemy positions. But but at the same time, it's a little different in a game. Certainly on the ground, I have a much better sense of direction than I do in a game. I easily get lost running around in a game in a map, so it's nice to have that easy to kind of reflect back to kind of thing. And I guess to me it kind of gives you an edge too because there's certain restrictions. Obviously, in a game, you're not actually there in real life, so you can't peek the way peek around a corner the way you would in real life, or you can't
Of course.
kind of
Yeah.
slowly crawl up some stairs or whatever kind of thing you can do in real life. So I give it as a balance with the the drone and the technology that you don't normally have with to kind of make up for not being able to be there in real life.
No,
Nice.
that makes complete sense. Totally. Yeah, absolutely. So is there anything that you'd add to the game to make it even more realistic? And for example,
Tanks!
tanks. Yes, we have mentioned tanks before, and we've mentioned it on this channel too. I will add one of my own in that I would love to see in this game is helicopter fast roping. Um, what do you think could be added to make improvements to the realism?
Jeff, we were just talking about fast roping, weren't we?
Yeah, I think yeah,
How scary it is.
yeah,
How strange! Great minds.
yeah, yeah. I think yeah. Like I was thinking about that earlier too. In terms of like, yeah, it's kind of cool like the base jumping or like the parachuting stuff out of the helicopters. But yeah, it'd be kind of cool to have a mission in a sense where you load up like an actual paratrooper and obviously you can't get the same sense of being squished into a a C-130 with 64 fellows all with a bunch of shit on and you know and then jumping out. But it would be kind of cool if there was some missions that had like an insertion thing like that where you have to jump from a plane passing by overhead, so you got to make the time on target and know the exact time to jump out and or like the fast rope thing like you mentioned. That was a good one, Andy. Doing like a mission like that where the helicopter comes in, you fast rope down and assault a building from the top.
Absolutely, and you obviously saying regards to realism. How do you think that they've done with the environments and stuff? Do you think, like I know before we started this, you mentioned about Wildlands, for example. There were parts of Wildlands that reminded you of Iraq.
Yeah, a lot of kind of as Chris described, sort of the environment of some of the talks and like the operation centers and stuff. Those little details, but um, especially in Wildlands, there was a lot of different parts that were very, to me, reminiscent of being in Iraq, especially that western front where it's all in this, it's like the salt mine or like the salt
The salt
flats.
plains. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah,
Flats. Yeah.
yeah. So like there was a base out there that looked almost exactly like a base that Chris and I had operated out of and stuff like that. So I think it's realistic in the way they set up kind of the environments.
Okay, that. Well, thank you. That's really fascinating. So, what about you, Chris? Do you think there's what about in Breakpoint, for example? Do you think there's anything? Do you think they've done a good job of like just the woodland and things like that? When you're walking through it as your character, do you think like, yeah, I can remember doing this, and does it that sense of does it feel real?
It does actually. When we do our exploration videos
Hmm.
in the jungles, there it reminds me of Belize, um, with the haze and just the sound and the wind, and even like when you go into hangars or something, you can even hear the wind changing a little bit as well. So they've paid attention to the small details.
Okay, fantastic. So we'll make this the last question, and then Chris, you can tell us a little bit about why you set up your channel. Um, so, if you could help develop a realistic kind of Ghost Recon game, whether it be the sequel to Wildlands or whatever it may be that comes next, what would you ask for them to put in the game that's maybe not in the game, or the kind of things that you'd like to see in a kind of tactical, realistic shooter like Ghost Recon?
Oh, I got one off the rip. To have if they are going to have AI in this, is to have your AI travel in a vehicle. Like, say you drive, and then to this point, well, like you can get your map out or reload, or something like that. So you could actually be the truck commander instead of the driver, free up your time.
Do you know what? That's a great idea because I've always wanted, even on Wildlands, I wished that you could have commandeered two vehicles, had two drivers and two gunners.
Yeah.
That the AI could have driven to, that they had more commands,
Yeah.
or even been able to jump between them. So you could, like, I don't know if you ever remember the old Desert Storm games on the
Yep.
PlayStation 2.
That's where I was going.
Yeah, so you used to be able to jump between the two, or you could jump between any of those characters. Now, I'm not saying
Yeah.
you would necessarily jump for good, but so you could switch a button, you could jump, put that person in exactly the position that you want them to snipe from, jump back to your main character briefly, and then you could set them up, or just kind of put the drone in so you could see from their angle, so you could put them exactly where they needed to go. That's something I would like to perfect AI teammate setup. Really expand that. So what about you, Jeff? Do you think there's anything that you would, if they said to you, "Come on, help us out. You've served. What are we doing here? What could we do? How could we make this more realistic? What about type of gear that you're carrying, or the things that maybe are not there on customization, or is there anything that you think that could benefit the game?" Or
Uh, I think you guys hit on solid points about the traveling with vehicles, and if you could do split up between two vehicles so that you could kind of maneuver them that way. And um, but I was also thinking of when you kind of comes to like CQB, like close quarters battle, like entering and clearing a room. If you're That was my biggest frustration in Wildlands is those, especially those missions where you have to take out the little satellite station and turn off the thing in time.
yeah,
Um, like
Yeah.
I would always try to set up my dudes like outside a door so I could breach it, and then like they could hopefully go in and at least take out some of those dudes that were inside. But every time they would either get taken out by the blast that I set up myself, or they would just sit outside and tell me that, oh yeah, I see a guy, and not actually do anything about it. So if there's just, I mean, I get that's asking a lot for AI
Well,
to do, but if
well, so
just like a
basically,
simple,
like a tactical breach option where you could set
yeah,
up your guys. It's even if it was like a kind of mini cutscene type thing, as they blew the door and moved in, and then the AI took over from there or something.
yeah, if they could just enter a room the way like number one guy goes to the left, number two guy goes to the
Yeah,
right, number three guy
yeah.
goes to the left, and like they all intersecting fields of fire and all that technical tactical shit that
No, that's cool, but
but
it's
Yes.
the kind of stuff that people really want to see in these type of games. Where I mentioned
yeah,
the helicopter fast roping. I'm sure the developers probably thought to themselves, "Well, look, we could do helicopter fast roping, or we could just have you land the helicopter." But and I get that it's like, why not just land it? But obviously, for that kind of people that really want that realism, it's like, yeah, but would you land a helicopter right there? You'd probably just want
Yeah.
to get your guys out, and the helicopter would then disappear.
yeah.
So I can see why people kind of want that. But I'm really thankful for your input of what you've said today, and I thought you've brought up some really interesting things. And obviously, if there's any other things that you want to add, please do so now. But if there's anything that you'd like to kind of finish off, talking about these games, then go for it. And then Chris, please go ahead if you wish and tell people a little bit about why you set up Bayonet X-Ray, because it's quite
Yeah.
important.
So, as I was driving back from Texas, a buddy of mine that works for basically like the military mall, it's called the PX, was telling me about how the Army is on Twitch now. They have an esports team. I'm like, really? And I just started kind of racking my head around, what can I do to help veterans? And here I am scrolling on my phone one day, and I'm looking at the suicide rate, and 22 a day, 22 veterans a day kill themselves, and the number is staggering. And it's just one of those stats where you keep scrolling and scrolling, and I stopped scrolling, and I started this channel, and I actually started using Breakpoint to go through my experience through basic training and off to war and back, and just really to go through from civilian to soldier and why we're coming back and killing ourselves, because we train up hard, man. We do some really cool stuff, and we get back here, and it's like we're kind of lost. And I made the analogy before, but it really is like Wildlands is your active duty days. It's so much fun. You can depend on your boys, and then when you get here, you are lost in the sauce, man. You can't figure out shit. and you can't do it alone. I mean, you can in the game. Obviously, you can figure out the ones and zeros.
Yeah.
But in the human brain, the ones and zeros are a little bit more complicated, because PTSD is our body's armor in response to trauma. We don't know how to handle it. We have these implicit memories that just pop up out of nowhere, and it troubles guys and gals, and they don't know how to process it, and they eventually kill themselves. And I created the channel to let people know you're not alone. We all think this way. Just stay up. Basically, is the message. So
That's fantastic. So you created it and you do live streams on there, things like that, raising awareness for this, which is huge. And it's so great to see somebody doing stuff like that, giving something back as well. I've watched some of them, and I implore anybody out there who is watching this to please check it out, because honestly, it's really good, and it's all for such a good, it's such a good cause. So. Please go over and check out Bayonet X-Ray. It's very cool. It's very funny, very entertaining as well. But go on, Chris.
let me caveat one thing too, is that you don't have to like subscribe to Bayonet X-Ray. You can go out, create your own YouTube channel, and and get with your old teammates and create your own little clique. If you were a loader, or if you were a radio guy or whatever, you just get back with your team, because when Jeff and I and Mike play in the mornings, it's some therapeutic ass shit, man.
That concludes my TED
Talk.
That's cool, and I'm pretty sure that Ubisoft would be quite happy to hear you say that that their games are actually providing you therapy from your war days. So and to be fair, if it does genuinely help in any way, shape, or form, it can't be a bad thing, can it?
No, absolutely.
There you go. Also, in the fact that overall, what you said, I think the both of you, and once again, I'd like to thank you personally, not just from the channel, but for everybody watching as well, for what you've done. I may be English, you may be American. We are very, very, very much on the same side. As far as I'm concerned, you still fight for me, so thank you very much. And thanks for your input. I think it's been fascinating hearing what you've had to say. And hearing your kind of how you looked at certain things. It's opened my eyes a little bit in how I might view the game going forward and stuff. But no, it's been great, and I really, really appreciate you coming on, both of you. So thank you again. And so if you'd like to
shout out.
You not any time, of course. So that's it. That's the end of the video. Thank you everyone for watching. Massively appreciate it as usual. Please feel free to hit the like and subscribe, especially on this one because it's an important one, and these two gentlemen have gone out of their way to provide you some really cool knowledge. So please hit the like button. I don't normally ask really hard, but please, if you can, that would be so cool if you could. I'd really appreciate it, and they would too. So thank you very much, and we'll see you again on the next video from myself and from Jeff and from Chris. Thank you so much. Bye bye.